The office was quiet, but not the calm, peaceful type of quiet that makes you feel safe. It was the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the subtle creak of a chair, the distant murmur of the city below. The silence felt heavy, almost expectant, like the room itself was holding its breath. Thomas Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Industries, stood near his desk, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. He was known for his precision, his ability to stay 3 steps ahead, but even he felt the tension in the air today. Something was off. Then, suddenly, the door slammed open. 4 men stormed in, each one moving with a kind of confidence that immediately set alarms ringing in anyone's instincts. Their presence hit the room like a physical wave, rattling the glass panels and making the air feel heavier. These weren't ordinary intruders. They weren't here to negotiate or steal some files. No, their focus was entirely on him, Thomas, and they wanted something personal. Thomas froze for a fraction of a second, long enough to take in the scene, but not long enough to show fear. Years of running a global empire had honed his instincts. He had dealt with hostile takeovers, boardroom threats, legal attacks, and even a few physical confrontations. Yet, the cold, calculating eyes of these men, paired with the almost predatory calm of their movements, made even him take notice. They weren't amateurs. They were professionals. Westbrook, the tallest one, barked, a jagged scar running along his jawline. "You've been a very bad man. Time to pay." Thomas's voice didn't waver. "I don't negotiate with people who break into my office." The words were calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to them, a sharpness that suggested consequences far beyond what the intruders had anticipated. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of tension. Thomas's mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, and leverage points. He knew he could handle them, but just as importantly, he had to protect the people around him. One misstep, 1 second of hesitation, could cost him everything. And then he noticed movement at the edge of the room. Olivia, his executive secretary, stepped forward. At first, she seemed almost fragile compared to the 4 aggressive men, but her posture was composed, deliberate, confident. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in each intruder's stance, their likely intentions, and the potential risk to Thomas. She didn't hesitate. She simply moved, and her presence immediately altered the room's energy. "That's enough," she said, her voice low but commanding. The intruders blinked, surprised by her audacity. Normally, people would panic. Normally, people would flee. Olivia did neither. Thomas, who had witnessed thousands of high-pressure scenarios, watched with a mix of surprise and admiration. He realized in that instant that he had underestimated her in ways he hadn't admitted even to himself. She wasn't just someone who organized his schedule or managed office logistics. She was decisive, courageous, and strategic, able to read a dangerous situation and act without hesitation. The leader sneered, clearly trying to intimidate her. "And who are you?" he demanded. Olivia's eyes didn't waver. "I'm the person who won't let you get away with this." Her tone was firm, unyielding, and carried a weight that didn't require volume to assert itself. The intruders laughed, assuming her words were empty. One of them made a step toward her, a move that seemed intended to assert dominance. In an instant, Olivia was in motion. Fluid, precise, almost imperceptible until it was too late, she used the edge of Thomas's desk as leverage, redirecting the man's momentum. He stumbled slightly, caught off guard by her swiftness and accuracy. Thomas stood motionless, absorbing every detail. Her courage wasn't loud or reckless. It was calculated and effective. She acted with precision because she understood the stakes, the human lives involved, and the values that couldn't be compromised. A small surge of something unfamiliar flickered inside him, admiration, respect, and perhaps something deeper he hadn't recognized before. The tension in the room escalated, thick enough to taste. Every second felt elongated. Then Olivia took another step forward, establishing a protective barrier between Thomas and the intruders. She didn't raise her voice or act with unnecessary aggression. She simply positioned herself in a way that communicated absolute control. "Leave now," she said, voice steady and unwavering. "You're not welcome here." "He's not every." For a brief moment, even the most confident intruders hesitated. They weren't used to being told no, especially not by someone who, at first glance, seemed like a mere administrative assistant. Slowly, reluctantly, the leader signaled the others to retreat. The intruders glanced at each other, calculating, before slowly backing toward the door. A final glare from the leader was directed at Thomas before the door slammed shut behind them. The room exhaled collectively once the danger was gone. Though the residual tension lingered, Thomas remained rooted to the spot, processing the sequence of events. He had known Olivia for years, relied on her implicitly, but today he had seen her in a new light. Her decisiveness, bravery, and strategic thinking had turned what could have been a catastrophic event into a manageable situation. She turned to face him, expression composed yet softened slightly. "Are you all right?" she asked. Thomas's gaze lingered on her. Words felt inadequate. I'm fine," he said finally, though he knew the words barely conveyed his sense of awe. He had witnessed something in Olivia that went beyond competence. It was instinctive courage, combined with intelligence and precision. Olivia gave a faint smile, one that conveyed reassurance, confidence, and an unspoken sense of loyalty. She didn't need to explain herself. Thomas understood. Her actions had communicated more than words ever could. He found himself reflecting on their past interactions, endless schedules managed, crises averted, decisions guided, yet nothing had prepared him for this. Today, Olivia had revealed dimensions of herself he hadn't allowed himself to see. Courage, strategic thinking under pressure, fearless loyalty. The office returned to its usual quiet, but it was a different kind of silence now. The calm wasn't just the absence of noise, it was a recognition of what had just transpired, a shift in the dynamic that neither Thomas nor Olivia could ignore. He realized that things had changed. The way he saw her, and perhaps even the way he saw himself in relation to her, had irrevocably shifted. Thomas exhaled slowly, finally breaking his stillness. "You handled that remarkably," he said, voice low, almost hesitant, as though speaking it aloud might break the spell of the moment. Olivia simply nodded. "It's what I do," she replied softly. But the slight lift of her eyebrow, the subtle tension in her stance, suggested she understood the unspoken acknowledgement in his gaze. Thomas took a step closer, feeling the rare stirrings of an emotion he didn't often entertain, genuine admiration, tinged with a spark of fascination. He had trusted her judgment countless times before, but never like this, never in a life-threatening moment where every second mattered. The office, once a space of routine and control, had transformed in an instant. The air seemed lighter, yet charged with a new awareness, an understanding that the familiar hierarchies of roles and expectations had shifted. Olivia was no longer simply a secretary. She was decisive, fearless, and, in Thomas's eyes, indispensable. For a brief moment, they simply stood there. Two people amidst the aftermath of tension, each aware of the other's presence in a way they never had before. The city below continued its constant rhythm, unaware of the quiet, intense drama that had unfolded high above its streets. And in that shared, silent acknowledgement, Thomas knew one thing with certainty. Everything about his perception of Olivia had changed. Everything about their dynamic, their understanding, and perhaps even their future interactions would never be the same. The office settled into an uneasy calm, but Thomas knew the reprieve was temporary. Even after the intruders had vanished, the weight of the incident lingered. His pulse had barely returned to normal, yet the adrenaline still hummed faintly under his skin. He glanced at Olivia, who had already resumed her usual calm demeanor, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She was reviewing the emails stacked neatly on the side of her desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a precision that belied the chaos that had just erupted. Thomas couldn't look away. Her composure, her efficiency, the way she controlled the aftermath without hesitation, It was mesmerizing. He realized then that Olivia's courage wasn't just in physical confrontations, it was in her ability to maintain clarity when everything threatened to unravel. "Thomas," she said without looking up, "your 3 p.m. with the investment team hasn't been confirmed yet. Do you want me to handle it?" Her voice was soft, almost casual, but her eyes flicked toward him, sharp and calculating. He nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, please, make sure it's secure. No surprises." Olivia gave a faint nod and continued typing, but Thomas noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. There was a tension there, a vigilance that hadn't been present before. He wondered if she felt the same way he did, an awareness that things had shifted, that the dynamics of their relationship, professional or otherwise, had been altered by what just occurred. He walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. The streets were bustling, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded in this office above. Thomas took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He had always prided himself on his control of the company, control of his schedule, control of outcomes. But today, control had felt fragile, almost illusory. Olivia approached quietly, standing just a few feet behind him. "Do you want me to handle the press statement?" she asked. "They'll be calling any minute, and the story is already leaking." Thomas turned to her, seeing the determination in her eyes. This wasn't just about managing logistics. She was stepping into a role that required judgment, diplomacy, and foresight. He realized that in every crisis, Olivia was the one who turned potential chaos into order. She wasn't merely supporting him, she was an integral part of the system that kept everything running. "Yes," he said finally. "Do it. Make sure it's precise, concise, firm, and make sure the phrasing reflects confidence." Olivia nodded, already on it. Thomas watched her move, thinking about how many times he had relied on her in less extreme situations, and how he had never truly appreciated the full extent of her capabilities. Today, though, there was no mistaking it. She was extraordinary. As she drafted the statement, Thomas felt a subtle shift in his perception. For years he had treated Olivia with respect, yes, but never with the recognition that her actions carried weight beyond administrative tasks. Today had been a revelation. She was decisive, fearless, and capable of standing up in moments where most people would falter. And somehow, that realization stirred something deeper within him, a curiosity, an admiration, and perhaps even something akin to awe. The phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. Olivia picked it up almost immediately, her tone professional but assertive. "This is Olivia Westbrook," she said. "Yes, the CEO is secure. No injuries. We will issue a statement within the hour." She paused, listening, then typed rapidly while maintaining control of the conversation. Every movement, every word, conveyed authority and confidence. Thomas watched, noticing the subtle ways she managed the narrative. She wasn't just relaying information, she was shaping perception, controlling outcomes, and ensuring that no detail was overlooked. It was the kind of competence that couldn't be taught. It was instinctual, honed over years of experience, and yet, today, it revealed a layer of bravery he hadn't fully recognized. After the call ended, Olivia turned to him, her expression calm but with a hint of intensity in her eyes. "Press will be contained. Internal teams briefed, security protocols updated. We're secure for now." Thomas nodded, absorbing the information. Her efficiency was remarkable, but it was her courage, her ability to act decisively under pressure, that impressed him most. He found himself reflecting on the day's events, not just the physical confrontation, but every decision, every move that Olivia had made to protect him and the company. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter than usual, not just for her actions, but for the realization of how much he relied on her. Olivia gave a small professional nod. "It's my job," she said. But Thomas noticed the slight hesitation, the human nuance in her tone that suggested she understood the gravity of the day and perhaps even sensed the unspoken acknowledgement of her importance. He stepped back from the window, pacing slightly, There was a part of him that had always kept people at a distance, maintained strict boundaries, and avoided emotional entanglements. But today, those barriers felt less relevant, almost artificial. Olivia had demonstrated qualities that transcended her role, qualities that made her indispensable not just to the company, but to him personally. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and briefings, but Thomas found his attention repeatedly drawn to her. Every interaction, every glance, every carefully measured action she took seemed to reinforce the impression that she was more than just his secretary. She was a force, precise, fearless, and invaluable. Later, as the office began to empty, Thomas approached her desk. She was organizing files, reviewing security logs, and ensuring that everything was accounted for. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, her mind clearly focused on multiple tasks simultaneously. "You handled today exceptionally," he said, his voice steady but with an underlying intensity. Olivia looked up, meeting his gaze. "It was necessary," she replied. "It's always necessary to be prepared for the unexpected." He nodded, understanding the truth in her words, but he also recognized that today, her preparation, courage, and decisiveness had gone far beyond the expected. She had taken initiative, assessed threats, and acted in ways that protected him and the company with remarkable clarity. For a moment, they simply stood there, acknowledging the day's events in silence. The office, once tense and chaotic, now felt charged with a different energy, a recognition of capability, trust, and the unspoken understanding that roles and perceptions had shifted. Thomas realized, as he watched her return to her work, that everything had changed. His perception of Olivia, her role in his life and the company, and perhaps even his own approach to trust and reliance, had been irrevocably altered. She had revealed a dimension of herself that he had never fully appreciated, and he knew that he would never see her the same way again. The office had finally returned to a semblance of normalcy, but Thomas couldn't shake the adrenaline that still lingered in his veins. The city outside moved on, indifferent to the near crisis that had unfolded in his penthouse office. Yet inside, every detail seemed magnified, the subtle hum of the air conditioning, the occasional beep from a nearby computer, even the faint ticking of the wall clock felt louder, more pronounced. Olivia moved with her usual precision, walking across the polished floor to check the security monitors. She studied the feeds, analyzing every camera angle, every entry point, every blind spot. Thomas followed her with a quiet, calculating curiosity. He had watched her handle crises before, but today she had demonstrated a depth of skill and courage that went far beyond routine office management. "You've double-checked all the access points?" Thomas asked, his tone measured but serious. "Every single one," Olivia replied. Her voice was calm, almost neutral, but the intensity behind her eyes betrayed the focus she had maintained throughout the day. "I've also updated security logs and alerted the night team to increase patrols. No one gets past this building without me knowing." Thomas nodded slowly. He realized that what she had done wasn't just protective, it was proactive. Every action was deliberate, informed, and calculated. And it wasn't only about him. It was about the company, the employees, the integrity of every operation he had built over the years. A silence fell between them, filled with unspoken acknowledgement. Thomas wanted to say more, to articulate the mix of respect, admiration, and something more personal that had emerged in him today, but he hesitated. Words felt inadequate. Olivia had always been competent, efficient, and reliable. But today she had revealed something extraordinary: decisiveness under pressure, courage when faced with real danger, and an unwavering commitment that transcended duty. "Do you want me to brief the board?" she asked, breaking the silence. "They'll want to know exactly what happened and how it was handled." Thomas considered it. The board needed to be reassured, but he also knew that framing the incident carefully was crucial. A misstep could spiral into a PR nightmare, destabilize investor confidence, and create unnecessary panic among the staff. "Yes," he said finally. "Draft a brief for them. Make it factual, concise, but highlight how quickly the situation was contained. Emphasize control and readiness, and make sure it conveys confidence, not panic." Olivia nodded, already moving toward her laptop. Thomas watched her fingers fly across the keys, drafting a message that would shape the perception of thousands. Her focus was absolute. Every detail mattered. Every word was deliberate. He marveled at her ability to navigate high-stakes scenarios with such calm precision. As she typed, Thomas found himself reflecting on the events of the day, the intruders, the confrontation, the silent moments when he had realized just how remarkable Olivia was. Everything coalesced into a pattern that he couldn't ignore. For years, he had depended on her in routine matters, trusting her judgment in daily operations, scheduling, and coordination. But today had revealed a different layer of her capabilities. She wasn't just competent, she was courageous, strategic, and instinctively protective of the things that mattered most to him and to the company. Olivia looked up from her laptop, glancing at him with a subtle yet knowing expression. "Draft is ready," she said. "I've also included contingency plans for the next 48 hours. You can review before we send it out." Thomas approached her desk, scanning the draft quickly. She had anticipated questions, preempted concerns, and addressed potential vulnerabilities. It was thorough, precise, and reassuring. He realized that while he had built an empire with his vision and strategy, it was people like Olivia, decisive, intelligent, fearless, that ensured it remained secure. "Excellent work," he said, his tone sincere. He paused, searching for words that could capture the weight of his acknowledgement. "I don't think I've ever fully appreciated how much of the company relies on you." "It cries." Olivia gave a faint smile. "It's what I do," she said. But her eyes, the brief lift of her eyebrows, conveyed an unspoken understanding. She recognized that Thomas had witnessed her capabilities in a different light today, and that their professional dynamic had shifted subtly, irrevocably. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine and catch-up. Thomas attended back-to-back meetings with the senior management team, while Olivia ensured that the office remained secure, coordinated communications, and handled the flow of incoming calls and emails. Despite the apparent normalcy, the incident from earlier continued to echo in Thomas's mind. He found his attention repeatedly drawn to Olivia, her calm efficiency, her sharp intelligence, and the courage she had displayed when others would have frozen. Later, as the office began to empty and evening approached, Thomas remained at his desk, reviewing the financial projections and strategic plans for the upcoming quarter. The skyline outside glowed with the fading light of the setting sun, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Every now and then, he glanced at Olivia, who was still moving methodically through her tasks, ensuring that everything was accounted for. "You handled today extraordinarily well," he said, finally breaking the quiet. Olivia paused, looking up at him. "It was necessary," she replied evenly. "Everything we do here is necessary. Preparation, vigilance, action, they're all part of the role." Thomas nodded, but he knew it was more than that. Today, Olivia had demonstrated qualities that went far beyond the scope of any role. She had taken initiative, assessed risk, and acted decisively to protect him and the company in ways that demanded recognition. He found himself considering, for the first time, not just her professional value, but the rare combination of courage, intelligence, and instinct she possessed. There was a brief silence, filled only by the soft hum of the office. They didn't need to speak. The events of the day had communicated everything that mattered, the trust, the acknowledgement, and the subtle shift in perception that had occurred between them. Thomas realized, with a quiet certainty, that nothing would be the same moving forward. The day had begun as routine. It had escalated into chaos, and through it all, Olivia had been the constant, the steady hand, and the decisive force that ensured the outcome was controlled, precise, and in their favor. As the city lights began to flicker on below, Thomas felt a subtle change within himself. He had always valued loyalty, competence, and discretion, But today he had witnessed a level of bravery and clarity that had left an impression he couldn't ignore. Olivia had changed everything, not just the outcome of the day, but the way he saw her, and perhaps even the way he understood the meaning of trust, reliance, and admiration. For a moment, he allowed himself a rare, unguarded thought. Perhaps, in addition to her role as his secretary, Olivia had revealed herself as someone indispensable, someone whose influence and capability went far beyond the obvious, and someone whose presence he would never take for granted again. The evening air settled over the city, painting the skyline in hues of orange and gold, yet Thomas remained in the office, surrounded by reports, projections, and the faint buzz of computers. The earlier chaos had left a residual tension, one that neither adrenaline nor routine could fully dissipate. Even though Olivia had efficiently restored order, Thomas found himself restless, his thoughts circling back to the events that had unfolded. Olivia, however, remained a model of calm. She moved through the office with a quiet purpose, organizing files, reviewing security logs, and ensuring every detail from the incident had been accounted for. Her movements were deliberate, precise, and almost hypnotic in their efficiency. She didn't rush, she didn't falter, and yet there was an intensity beneath her, calm, a readiness that made Thomas realize just how prepared she had always been, even before the crisis hit. "You've double-checked everything?" Thomas asked, breaking the silence, his voice carrying a subtle mix of curiosity and concern. "Every access point, every camera, every protocol," Olivia replied, eyes focused on the screens in front of her. "I've also updated contingency measures for the next 48 hours. Anything unusual, I'll know immediately." Thomas nodded slowly, appreciating the thoroughness and foresight. Olivia didn't just react, she anticipated, planned, and executed. Her bravery wasn't about bold gestures or reckless heroics. It was about clarity under pressure, the ability to make the right decisions in moments that would paralyze most people. He found himself pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city below. The streets were alive, moving in rhythms unaffected by the chaos that had just occurred above. Yet Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, not just in the office, but within himself. For years he had controlled his environment, his schedule, even his emotions with precision. Today, he had realized how much of that control depended on people like Olivia, whose decisiveness and insight made him, and the company, more secure. Olivia approached, quietly observing his reflection in the glass before speaking. "The intruders won't come back, at least not in the same formation," she said. "But if they do, we'll be ready. Security teams are on alert, and the statement to the board is ready for immediate release." Thomas turned to her, noticing the faint glint of pride in her eyes, pride tempered with professionalism. "You handled everything with remarkable precision," he said. The words felt insufficient, yet they carried the weight of genuine recognition. Olivia's response was understated, almost casual. "It's my responsibility," she said, returning to her desk. Yet Thomas saw more than professionalism. He saw courage, judgment, and an unwavering commitment that went far beyond mere duty. Today, she had acted decisively, protecting not only him, but the entire operation, with a level of composure that left him silently in awe. He returned to his desk, trying to refocus on the reports in front of him, but his mind kept drifting back to the earlier confrontation. Every detail replayed vividly the way Olivia had assessed the threat, the precision of her movements, the quiet authority in her voice that had stopped the intruders in their tracks. Most people would have panicked, but she had acted with calculated decisiveness, turning what could have been a disaster into a controlled outcome. The phone rang, piercing the quiet. Olivia picked it up immediately, her tone calm yet authoritative. "Westbrook Industries," she said. "Yes, the CEO is secure. The situation is contained. We will issue the official statement shortly." Thomas watched as she handled the conversation with flawless precision. Every question, every potential angle had been anticipated. She wasn't just relaying information, she was shaping perception, managing outcomes, and ensuring confidence in a situation that could easily have escalated. Her ability to navigate high-pressure scenarios was extraordinary, and Thomas couldn't help but admire the depth of her competence. When the call ended, Olivia turned to him, her posture relaxed but her gaze steady. "Everything is under control," she said. "The internal teams have been briefed, and the press will be contained. We're secure." Thomas nodded, absorbing her words. She had gone beyond her role, demonstrating courage, strategic thinking, and an instinctive ability to manage threats. Her presence today had been more than supportive, it had been critical. And in that realization, Thomas felt an unfamiliar sense of admiration, respect, and something deeper stirring within him. He took a step closer, watching her work. For years, he had seen her as competent, reliable, and professional. But today, he had witnessed a new dimension of her capabilities. She had been decisive in the face of danger, proactive in managing risk, and unwaveringly composed under pressure. The combination of intelligence, courage, and judgment she displayed was rare, and Thomas felt a profound acknowledgement of her importance not just to the company, but to him personally. The office grew quieter as the evening deepened, the city below fading into a tapestry of lights. Thomas and Olivia worked in tandem, each aware of the other's presence, yet maintaining their own focus. There was a rhythm to their actions, a subtle synchrony that spoke to years of collaboration, trust, and now, a deeper understanding forged in the crucible of crisis. Finally, Thomas leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "You've changed the way I see everything," he admitted, his voice low, deliberate. "Not just your role here, but your impact, your judgment, your courage. I've underestimated you, for far too long." Olivia looked up, meeting his gaze. Her expression was calm, professional, but there was a hint of recognition, an acknowledgement of the weight of his words. "I've always been prepared," she said simply. "It's what's required to keep this place and you safe." Thomas nodded, silently acknowledging the truth in her words. He understood, in that moment, that Olivia's bravery, intelligence, and decisiveness were not only invaluable but transformative. She had reshaped his perception, challenging his assumptions, and redefining the dynamics of trust and reliance. As the evening deepened and the office lights dimmed, Thomas felt a quiet shift within himself. For the first time in years, he saw Olivia not just as a secretary or assistant, but as a decisive, fearless individual whose presence could shape outcomes in ways he had never fully appreciated. He realized that his respect and admiration for her had grown into something more profound, something that transcended professional boundaries and hinted at a deeper connection, forged in moments of crisis and clarity. For a long while, they worked side by side in silence, the unspoken acknowledgement between them more powerful than words. The events of the day had left an indelible mark, a subtle yet profound change in perception, trust, and understanding. Thomas knew, with a quiet certainty, that this day would be remembered not for the danger itself, but for the revelation of who Olivia truly was, and the recognition of the depth, courage, and capability she brought to every aspect of their shared world. The night settled over the city, the glow from streetlights and office windows painting the skyline in a soft amber haze. Inside the Westbrook Industries penthouse, Thomas Westbrook remained at his desk, reviewing every detail of the day. The crisis had passed, yet the impact lingered. Every decision, every movement, every reaction replayed vividly in his mind. Olivia moved quietly around the office, double-checking security logs, confirming communications, and ensuring that nothing had been overlooked. Even in the calm aftermath, she remained vigilant, her eyes scanning monitors and reports, her mind running through contingency plans and potential scenarios. She didn't need to announce her authority. It was evident in the way she moved, in the precision of her actions, and the quiet confidence she exuded. Thomas watched her for a moment, realizing how much he had relied on her over the years without fully acknowledging it. Today had been different. Today, she had acted decisively, courageously, and with a level of insight that went beyond mere professional duty. Her actions had saved him, protected the company, and ensured that order was maintained under pressure. "You've already planned for every possibility," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Even after everything, you're still thinking 2 steps ahead." Olivia glanced up, her expression calm but focused. "Preparation is part of the role," she replied. "But beyond that, it's about responsibility. Someone has to make sure decisions are executed accurately, consequences minimized, and people kept safe." Thomas nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. Responsibility. That was the core of her courage, the reason she had intervened so decisively earlier. It wasn't bravado or recklessness, it was a clear, unwavering sense of duty. And in that, she had not only protected him but also reinforced a standard of excellence he could depend on implicitly. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the city lights outside. For years, he had prided himself on control of his schedule, control of his company, control of outcomes. Yet today had shown him the limits of that control, and the critical role people like Olivia played in maintaining it. She wasn't just an assistant or a secretary. She was a force of competence, judgment, and courage that ensured the machine ran smoothly even when chaos threatened to disrupt it. Olivia approached, holding a folder with the finalized security and PR protocols. "I've updated the press statement and internal briefings," she said. "Everything is aligned, and the teams are ready to respond if needed. You won't need to intervene unless absolutely necessary." Thomas accepted the folder, scanning through the documents. Every detail was precise, every scenario accounted for, and every line of communication carefully considered. He felt a deep sense of respect and acknowledgement for her capabilities. This wasn't just administrative work. This was strategic execution, decisive action under pressure, and clear leadership in moments of uncertainty. "You handled the board briefing and press preparations seamlessly," he said, finally finding his words. "Your foresight today, it's remarkable. I've underestimated your capabilities." Olivia gave a faint smile, a subtle lift of her eyebrows, but said nothing. Her actions, not her words, had conveyed her competence. Thomas realized that she had always been extraordinary. He had just never been forced to see it in such stark clarity until now. The office grew quieter, the hum of electronics, the only sound. Thomas found his thoughts wandering back to the confrontation. Earlier in the day, the calculated precision of her movements, the calm authority in her voice, the way she had anticipated the intruder's every action. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have hesitated. But not Olivia. She had been decisive, fearless, and unflinching. He reflected on how easily she had restored order afterward, handling security updates, press statements, and internal communications with flawless efficiency. It was clear to him now that her bravery wasn't just about action in the moment. It was about consistent judgment, foresight, and a deep understanding of responsibility. That was what set her apart. Thomas glanced at her again. "You've changed the way I view this office, and the way I view trust, reliance, and decision-making. Today, you've demonstrated qualities I can't ignore." Olivia looked up, her gaze steady. "It's not about recognition," she said quietly. "It's about doing what's necessary. That's always been the standard." He nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Her courage, insight, and decisiveness had created a new dynamic between them, a recognition that went beyond professional respect. Today had shifted the perception of her role in his life and the company. He realized that he had underestimated not just her capabilities, but also the depth of character that enabled her to act decisively when it mattered most. The night stretched on, and the office took on a tranquil, almost reflective atmosphere. Thomas continued reviewing reports while Olivia finalized her security checks. Every so often, their eyes met across the room, and a quiet acknowledgement passed between them. It was unspoken, yet profound, a recognition of shared experience, trust, and understanding forged under extraordinary circumstances. Thomas realized that this day had marked a turning point. Olivia's actions had not only protected him and the company, but had also revealed a level of competence, bravery, and insight he hadn't fully appreciated until now. She had demonstrated leadership, decisiveness, and unwavering judgment, and in doing so, she had transformed the way he saw her not just as a secretary or assistant, but as a pivotal figure in both his professional and personal sphere. For a long while, they worked side by side in silence. The events of the day had left an indelible mark, a subtle yet significant change in the way Thomas perceived capability, trust, and courage. He knew, without needing to speak the words aloud, that this moment would influence his perception of Olivia forever. By the time the city lights illuminated the office, Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the day. He understood now that Olivia's presence was more than administrative competence. It was courage, clarity, and decisive judgment in action. She had demonstrated what it meant to act under pressure, to anticipate threats, and to protect what mattered most. And Thomas realized, with quiet certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again, not the office, not their dynamic, and not the way he saw Olivia herself. The following morning, the atmosphere in the Westbrook Industries office was markedly different. The tension from the previous day's events had dissipated, but the memory of the confrontation and Olivia's decisive actions still hung subtly in the air. Staff moved with their usual efficiency, unaware of the near crisis that had unfolded, while Thomas sat at his desk, sipping his coffee and reflecting on the events. Olivia approached, holding a tablet with the updated schedules and reports. She had been awake early, ensuring that security protocols were reinforced and that internal communications had been distributed efficiently. Her movements were fluid, precise, and calm, yet Thomas noticed an intensity in her eyes that mirrored his own. She had been through a lot in the past 24 hours, but she carried herself with unwavering focus. "Thomas," she began, placing the tablet on his desk, "I've updated the schedules for the investment meetings. The board briefing has been reviewed, and all security contingencies are in place. We're prepared for any scenario." He looked up at her, taking a moment to appreciate her presence. "You never cease to impress," he said, his voice steady but carrying a note of sincerity. "Yesterday, today, it's clear how much you manage behind the scenes. You make the impossible look routine." Olivia gave a faint smile, her eyes scanning the tablet briefly before returning to him. "It's what's required to keep everything running smoothly," she replied, her tone modest yet resolute. "Preparation, foresight, execution, that's how things stay under control." Thomas leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. For years he had relied on her competence, but yesterday had revealed a different layer: her courage, her strategic thinking, and her ability to act decisively under pressure. She wasn't just an administrator. She was a guardian of the company, a decisive force in moments of crisis, and a trusted presence who could be counted on when everything else was uncertain. He opened his tablet, reviewing the schedules she had prepared. Every detail was accounted for. Contingency plans for unexpected delays, backup meeting arrangements, and precise timing for each executive briefing. It was meticulous, comprehensive, and entirely reliable, just as he had come to expect from Olivia. But yesterday's events had deepened his respect. As he glanced up, he noticed her watching him, not in a way that demanded acknowledgement, but in a way that reflected confidence and awareness. She understood the weight of her actions, the responsibility she bore, and the subtle shift in perception that had occurred between them. Thomas realized that their professional dynamic had changed, and perhaps so had the personal undertones of their relationship. The phone on his desk rang, cutting through the quiet of the office. Olivia picked it up immediately, her tone calm and authoritative. "Westbrook Industries," she said. "Yes, everything is secure. We're monitoring the situation closely, and all protocols are in place." Thomas watched as she handled the call with flawless composure. Every question, every potential complication had been anticipated. She was not merely relaying information. She was shaping perception, controlling outcomes, and ensuring confidence in a potentially volatile situation. Her ability to navigate high-pressure scenarios was exceptional, and he felt a deep admiration for her skill and dedication. After the call ended, she returned to his desk, her posture relaxed but alert. "The teams are ready for any updates or changes. You won't need to intervene unless absolutely necessary," she said, her voice measured, conveying both assurance and authority. Thomas nodded. "You've proven more than capable," he said. "Yesterday, today, it's evident how indispensable you are. I've underestimated your abilities in ways I won't repeat." Olivia's faint smile acknowledged the compliment, without disrupting the professionalism she maintained. She understood the significance of his words, the unspoken recognition that had been building since the confrontation. Thomas had seen her courage, decisiveness, and unwavering judgment firsthand. The morning passed with routine tasks, yet the undertone of yesterday's events persisted. Thomas found himself increasingly aware of Olivia's presence not just in terms of professional capability, but in the subtle ways she influenced outcomes, mitigated risks, and maintained order. Her composure was reassuring, her decisiveness inspiring, and her insight invaluable. At midday, the board briefing commenced. Thomas presented the company's updates, strategies, and projections with clarity, while Olivia monitored the communication channels, ensuring that all information was precise and consistent. She interjected only when necessary, offering critical updates and insights that reinforced the company's position and demonstrated her mastery of both logistics and strategy. Thomas noted, once again, how seamlessly she integrated into every aspect of the operation. Her foresight, judgment, and ability to act decisively had been apparent throughout the crisis and continued to manifest in daily operations. He understood now that her influence extended beyond her title. It shaped the very efficiency, stability, and resilience of the company. After the briefing, Thomas and Olivia returned to the office. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection, acknowledging the subtle but profound shift in their dynamic. For years, he had viewed her primarily as a capable assistant. Now, he recognized her as a strategic partner, a decisive force, and someone whose courage and judgment he deeply respected. "Olivia," he said finally, breaking the quiet, "you've changed the way I view this company and the way I view trust, reliability, and judgment. You've shown me how critical foresight and courage are, especially when everything is on the line." She looked at him steadily, meeting his gaze with composure and quiet confidence. "It's always been about doing what's necessary," she said simply. "Ensuring stability, protecting people, maintaining order, it's always been my responsibility." Thomas nodded. Her words resonated deeply, reinforcing the respect, admiration, and subtle sense of trust that had grown since the confrontation. He realized that her courage wasn't performative or flashy. It was rooted in responsibility, foresight, and unwavering commitment. She had revealed qualities that transcended her role, qualities that he now saw as indispensable to both the company and himself. As the day progressed, Thomas observed her handling tasks with precision, managing communications, and maintaining control over every potential complication. Her decisiveness, efficiency, and courage continued to impress him. Each action reinforced the recognition that Olivia was more than capable, and she was transformative, a stabilizing force and a guiding presence in moments of uncertainty. By the end of the afternoon, Thomas allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Olivia had demonstrated her abilities repeatedly, from the confrontation with the intruders to the meticulous management of security and communications. He understood now that her courage, foresight, and judgment were qualities that could not be quantified or replicated. They were intrinsic, and they had become central to the company's resilience. For Thomas, the recognition was not just professional, it was deeply personal. He had witnessed her bravery and decisiveness firsthand, and it had left a lasting impression. He knew that from this point forward, he would view her not merely as a secretary or assistant, but as a critical partner, someone whose influence, judgment, and courage he could rely on implicitly. The evening descended gradually, leaving the city bathed in a soft golden hue that faded into deep indigo as night took hold. In the penthouse of Westbrook Industries, Thomas remained at his desk, reviewing the day's operations and the cascading effects of yesterday's events. The adrenaline had long subsided, but an underlying tension remained, a silent acknowledgement that the past 24 hours had changed everything. Olivia moved through the office with her usual precision, cross-referencing security protocols, double-checking internal communications, and confirming every contingency plan. Despite the calmness she projected, Thomas noticed a subtle intensity in her eyes. It was a quiet fire, a focused vigilance that never wavered. Every movement she made seemed deliberate yet effortless, a testament to the seamless integration of intellect, experience, and instinct. "You've updated all contingencies for tonight?" Thomas asked, his voice measured yet carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. "Yes," she replied, her tone steady. "Every shift, every security checkpoint, every communication channel is accounted for. I've also briefed the night team to stay vigilant. No room for surprises." Thomas exhaled softly, leaning back in his chair. He watched her, aware of a growing realization. Olivia's capability went far beyond administrative efficiency. Her courage and foresight were not performative. They were inherent, a natural extension of her intelligence and responsibility. She had acted decisively yesterday, not out of impulse, but from an acute understanding of stakes, consequences, and priorities. The city below seemed oblivious to the quiet intensity inside the office, the near crisis that had unfolded, and the subtle shift in perception between Thomas and Olivia. He took a moment to reflect, realizing that her actions had revealed dimensions of her character he had never fully appreciated. Competence alone was insufficient to describe her. Courage, clarity, and judgment under pressure defined her as much as her ability to manage schedules or logistics. Thomas's thoughts wandered back to the confrontation. Olivia's precision, the calm authority in her voice, the way she anticipated and neutralized threats, it had been a revelation. Most people would have panicked, hesitated, or frozen. Olivia had done none of those things. She had acted with purpose, foresight, and an unflinching commitment to maintaining order. "You've set an example today," Thomas said finally, breaking the quiet. "Not just in action, but in judgment. It's clear that your presence here ensures stability in ways I hadn't fully realized." Olivia looked up briefly, her eyes meeting his. There was no arrogance, no need for recognition, only the steady acknowledgement of shared understanding. "Stability requires vigilance," she said simply. "It's not about recognition, it's about responsibility." Thomas nodded, understanding. Her words encapsulated her approach, deliberate, decisive, and rooted in foresight. She acted because it was necessary, because she understood the consequences, and because she accepted responsibility for outcomes. That realization deepened his admiration and respect. The evening wore on, and the office settled into a rhythm of quiet productivity. Thomas focused on the projections and reports before him, while Olivia continued her methodical checks and communications. Occasionally, their eyes met, and an unspoken acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition of competence, trust, and the subtle transformation of their professional dynamic. The hours progressed, and Thomas found himself increasingly aware of Olivia's influence. Her ability to manage complexity, anticipate challenges, and act decisively was unparalleled. She wasn't just efficient, she was transformative. Every step she took reinforced the understanding that her courage, judgment, and foresight were indispensable. By late evening, Thomas stood near the window, looking out over the city. The events of the day had forced him to reconsider assumptions about capability, loyalty, and trust. Olivia had not only acted decisively under pressure, but had redefined his perception of what it meant to be indispensable, reliable, and courageous. She had shown that true leadership and bravery often manifested quietly, through judgment and foresight rather than overt action. "Olivia," Thomas said, finally breaking the quiet, "today has changed the way I see everything, this office, the company, and you. I've underestimated your capabilities, and now I understand just how crucial your judgment and courage are." She looked up, steady and calm, but with a glimmer of acknowledgment in her eyes. "It's always been necessary," she replied. "Every decision, every precaution, it's all part of maintaining order and security." Thomas nodded, taking in the weight of her words. Her courage and decisiveness were not about recognition or accolades, they were intrinsic, an inseparable part of her character. She had demonstrated a level of competence and bravery that few could match, and in doing so, had left an indelible impression on him. As the night deepened, Thomas returned to his work, yet his mind remained partially with Olivia. Her actions, her presence, and her unwavering clarity in moments of uncertainty had reshaped his understanding of leadership, trust, and reliance. He realized that he would never view her or the office or the company the same way again. For a long while they continued side by side, each immersed in their responsibilities. The events of the previous day had forged a subtle but profound connection, an acknowledgement of capability, courage, and trust that needed no words. Thomas understood that this moment and Olivia's decisive actions had altered the trajectory of their relationship, professionally and personally. By the time the city lights illuminated the office with a soft glow, Thomas reflected on the day's lessons. Olivia had shown him that competence, courage, and foresight were inseparable. She had demonstrated that true bravery often existed in quiet decisiveness, in the willingness to take responsibility and act strategically when everything was on the line. And he knew, with a certainty that resonated deeply, that nothing between them or in the office would ever be the same again. The night air had settled into a quiet rhythm, and the city below shimmered like a sea of scattered lights. The office felt unusually still, yet the residual energy from the previous day's events lingered. Thomas sat at his desk, meticulously reviewing financial reports and strategic forecasts. Every number, every projection, seemed heavier now, weighted with the knowledge of yesterday's intrusion and Olivia's decisive actions. Olivia moved around the office with practiced efficiency, confirming security protocols, updating reports, and cross-checking every detail. Her presence was commanding without being overt. Every movement carried intent, every glance conveyed awareness. Thomas watched her for a moment, realizing how deeply she influenced the operations here. Her vigilance, her foresight, and her quiet authority had prevented potential chaos from spiraling out of control. "You've covered every angle?" Thomas asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," Olivia replied, her tone calm but resolute. "All systems are secure, security teams are briefed, and communication lines are ready. We're prepared for any contingency." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the sheer competence she displayed. She didn't just react, she anticipated. Her courage wasn't about bold gestures, it was about precision, foresight, and responsibility. She had acted decisively yesterday, not from impulse, but from a clear understanding of stakes, consequences, and priorities. He thought back to the moment when she had stood between him and the intruders, her composure unwavering. Most people would have panicked, frozen, or hesitated. Olivia had done none of those things. She had assessed the threat, calculated the risks, and acted instantly, protecting him and the company with unparalleled precision. Thomas allowed himself a brief, rare moment of admiration. It wasn't just her courage, it was the way she combined strategy, instinct, and moral clarity. She had not only preserved order, but had redefined his understanding of loyalty, competence, and decisiveness. The soft hum of the computers punctuated the silence. Thomas's mind drifted to the implications of what had occurred. Olivia had become indispensable, not just operationally but strategically. Her ability to maintain clarity and control under pressure had turned a potential disaster into a demonstration of resilience and preparedness. Olivia approached, carrying an updated dossier with contingency plans and operational updates. "Everything is aligned," she said. "I've reinforced the protocols, and the teams are aware of the next steps. You won't need to intervene unless absolutely necessary." Thomas scanned the documents, noting the meticulous detail in her work. Every potential scenario had been addressed, every possible complication accounted for. He was struck by the depth of her foresight. She had the rare ability to see beyond immediate threats, to anticipate challenges before they arose, and to take decisive action that neutralized risk while maintaining order. "You've set an incredible example today," Thomas said, his voice steady but sincere. "Not only in action but in judgment. You've shown me how critical foresight and courage are in moments of uncertainty." Olivia met his gaze, her expression calm yet intense. "It's not about recognition," she replied. "It's about responsibility. Decisions have consequences, and it's essential to act with clarity and purpose." Thomas nodded. He realized that Olivia's bravery and competence had shifted the dynamic between them. She was no longer just his secretary. She was a strategic partner, someone whose judgment and courage directly influenced outcomes. Her presence was transformative, reshaping the way he perceived trust, reliance, and capability. The evening progressed, and the office settled into a rhythm of quiet productivity. Thomas focused on strategic planning, while Olivia continued her meticulous oversight. Their interactions were minimal, yet charged with mutual acknowledgement, a silent recognition of competence, trust, and shared responsibility forged in the crucible of crisis. Thomas reflected on the subtle, profound shift in their dynamic. Olivia had revealed qualities that went far beyond professional duty: decisiveness under pressure, strategic foresight, and unwavering courage. These attributes had not only preserved the company's stability, but had also left an indelible impression on him personally. By late evening, Thomas allowed himself to relax slightly, leaning back and observing Olivia as she finalized her checks and reports. He understood now that her courage, intelligence, and decisiveness were not just valuable, they were essential. She had acted with clarity when chaos threatened, demonstrating a rare combination of skill, judgment, and moral strength. Thomas spoke quietly, almost to himself, yet intentionally so she could hear. "You've changed the way I see this office, and the way I see you." Olivia glanced at him, acknowledging the statement with a calm nod. "It's always been about responsibility," she said. "Ensuring order, stability, and preparedness. That's my priority." "Es another." Thomas considered her words, recognizing the truth in them. Her actions had demonstrated courage, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to responsibility. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, revealing qualities that transcended her role and reshaped his understanding of trust, reliance, and competence. The night deepened, and the office fell into a hushed, reflective silence. Thomas continued his work, but his thoughts repeatedly returned to Olivia. Her courage, judgment, and decisiveness had left a lasting impact, redefining their professional dynamic and deepening his appreciation for her capabilities. By the time the city outside was cloaked in darkness, Thomas felt a subtle shift within himself. Olivia had not only preserved the company's stability, she had demonstrated leadership, strategic foresight, and bravery that went beyond expectations. He understood that from this point forward, he would view her not merely as a secretary or assistant, but as an indispensable partner, a guardian of order, and someone whose judgment and courage he could rely on implicitly. For a long while, they worked in tandem, side by side, yet silently acknowledging the bond forged through shared experiences and crisis management. The events of the past days had left an indelible mark on Thomas, altering the way he perceived trust, capability, and courage. He knew, with quiet certainty, that Olivia's influence extended far beyond her title. She had redefined his understanding of professionalism, bravery, and strategic thinking, leaving an impression that would shape their interactions and the company's trajectory for years to come. And as the night deepened, Thomas allowed himself a rare, unguarded thought. Perhaps for the first time, he had truly recognized not only Olivia's indispensable role, but also the depth of character, courage, and intelligence she brought into every decision, every action, and every moment of their shared world. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden streaks across the office floor. Thomas sat at his desk, the reports and strategic briefings stacked neatly before him, but his attention was divided. Yesterday's events, the intrusion, Olivia's decisive intervention, and the aftermath kept replaying in his mind. Every action she had taken, every decision she had made, left him quietly astonished. Olivia moved around the office with her usual meticulous efficiency. Her eyes flicked to the security monitors, then to the communications dashboard, and back to the operational brief. She didn't need direction. She had anticipated everything. Every step she took exuded confidence and control, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a growing respect not just for her professionalism, but for her courage, foresight, and decisive judgment. "You've reviewed all contingencies for the day?" Thomas asked, his voice calm yet layered with a curiosity he hadn't felt before. "Yes," Olivia replied, her tone steady, almost understated. "All systems are secure. Security teams are aware, internal communications have been updated, and I've verified the schedules for every critical meeting. We're prepared for any unexpected events." A plane. Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the subtle yet profound difference between competence and true capability. Olivia didn't just execute tasks. She anticipated challenges, prepared for contingencies, and acted decisively when it mattered most. Her bravery and foresight yesterday had revealed a new layer of her character, one that combined strategic intelligence with unwavering courage. He recalled the confrontation vividly, the intruder's confident advance, the tension in the air, and Olivia stepping forward with calm authority. Most people would have hesitated, panicked, or frozen. But she had moved with purpose, her mind calculating every possible outcome, her actions precise and effective. Thomas realized that courage wasn't just about boldness, it was about clarity, under pressure, judgment, and the ability to protect what mattered most. "Your foresight yesterday and today, it's remarkable," Thomas said finally, his voice carrying a quiet sincerity. "You've demonstrated qualities that go beyond duty, strategic thinking, courage, and the ability to act decisively. I've underestimated your capabilities for too long." Olivia met his gaze calmly. "It's not about recognition," she replied. "It's about responsibility. Every action has consequences. It's always been necessary to act with clarity and purpose." Thomas nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Her courage wasn't performative. It wasn't about recognition. It was intrinsic, rooted in responsibility and foresight. She had revealed a rare combination of qualities that had ensured the company's stability and preserved order under extraordinary pressure. The office grew quieter as the morning progressed. Staff members moved through their routines, unaware of the depth of the previous day's crisis, while Thomas and Olivia focused on ensuring every detail was accounted for. Their interactions were minimal but charged with subtle acknowledgement, trust, competence, and the shared understanding forged under pressure. Thomas observed her as she moved seamlessly between tasks, checking reports, updating security logs, and coordinating with teams. Each action was deliberate, efficient, and precise. He realized that her courage and judgment were inseparable from her professional capability. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, demonstrating not only competence but also leadership, clarity, and moral strength. By midday, Thomas convened a quick review with senior managers, ensuring that all departments were aligned with operational and security protocols. Olivia monitored communications, interjecting only when necessary, providing critical insights that ensured accuracy and cohesion. Her influence was subtle yet transformative, shaping outcomes without drawing attention to herself. After the meeting, Thomas returned to his office, reflecting on the day so far. Olivia approached, holding a tablet with the updated operational reports. "Everything is aligned," she said. "All contingencies have been checked, schedules verified, and communications monitored. You won't need to intervene unless absolutely necessary." Thomas accepted the tablet, scanning the contents. Every detail was accounted for, every potential risk addressed. He understood now that her role extended far beyond administrative efficiency. She was the stabilizing force behind every critical operation. Her decisiveness, courage, and foresight ensured that chaos remained contained and order maintained. "You've proven indispensable," Thomas said quietly. "Yesterday's events and today's precision. I've never fully appreciated how much we rely on your judgment and courage. You've redefined what capability looks like in this office." Olivia nodded subtly, acknowledging the statement without breaking her calm professionalism. She understood the significance of his words and the shift in perception that had occurred between them. Her competence and bravery had not only safeguarded the company, but had also transformed the professional dynamic they shared. As the afternoon progressed, Thomas observed her handling tasks with meticulous efficiency. Her movements, decisions, and judgment continued to reinforce his realization. Olivia was more than a secretary. She was a critical partner, a strategic force, and a decisive presence capable of navigating complexity and uncertainty with precision. By evening, Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection. Olivia's courage, intelligence, and decisiveness had left an indelible impression. She had demonstrated that true capability involved anticipation, foresight, and the willingness to act decisively when circumstances demanded it. Thomas understood that he would never view her or their professional relationship the same way again. As the city lights glimmered outside the office windows, Thomas and Olivia continued their work, side by side, yet aware of the unspoken acknowledgement between them. It was a quiet understanding, born from shared experience and forged under pressure, a recognition of competence, courage, and trust that transcended routine interactions. And Thomas realized, with a quiet certainty, that Olivia's presence was transformative, not only for the company, but for the way he understood trust, reliance, and decisive action. Her judgment, courage, and foresight would shape not only the operations of Westbrook Industries, but also the professional and perhaps personal dynamic between them, forever altering the trajectory of their shared world. As the office transitioned into the late afternoon, the hum of activity quieted to a steady rhythm. Employees moved efficiently through their tasks, yet Thomas couldn't shake the memory of the previous day's intrusion and Olivia's decisive intervention. Each time he reflected on it, he realized anew just how remarkable her actions had been. Olivia approached his desk, carrying a tablet filled with updated analytics and operational summaries. She placed it down with practiced precision, ensuring everything was accessible without disrupting workflow. Thomas noticed the subtle confidence in her movements, the unspoken authority that came from her thorough understanding of the office's operations and security protocols. "Morning briefings are ready," she said calmly. "Security updates are logged, and the teams have been aligned with contingency plans. Everything is prepared." Thomas glanced up from his reports, his mind lingering on her words. "You anticipate every detail before anyone else even thinks about it," he said. "It's not just efficiency, it's foresight, courage, and judgment combined. I've underestimated how crucial your presence is." Olivia gave a subtle nod, acknowledging the comment without breaking her professional demeanor. "It's always about responsibility," she replied. "Every action has consequences. I make sure those consequences are manageable." Thomas leaned back in his chair, realizing just how much he had relied on her without fully recognizing the depth of her abilities. Her bravery yesterday had not been about dramatic gestures, but about calculated action, decisiveness, and an unwavering commitment to responsibility. He thought back to the moment she had stood between him and the intruders, analyzing every movement, predicting outcomes, and taking precise action. Her calmness in the face of danger had shifted the course of events entirely. Most people would have faltered. She had acted instinctively, blending courage with calculated judgment. The office remained quiet, but there was an invisible energy in the room, a shared awareness of the subtle shift in the dynamic between them. Thomas watched as Olivia coordinated with security teams, verified communications, and ensured all contingencies were in place. She was in command without making a scene. Her presence commanding respect through competence and decisiveness rather than overt authority. You've not only secured the company's operations but also redefined how I view preparedness, Thomas said quietly, almost to himself. Your foresight is unparalleled, and your courage, it's transformative. Olivia glanced up briefly, her expression calm yet aware of the weight of his words. It's not about recognition, she said. It's about doing what's necessary to protect people and maintain order. He had not. Thomas nodded, internalizing the truth in her statement. Her courage, foresight, and decisiveness were intrinsic qualities, not performative acts. She had demonstrated that true capability required clarity of judgment, strategic thinking, and the willingness to act decisively when stakes were high. The afternoon passed with them working in tandem, side by side. Thomas observed how seamlessly Olivia integrated operational oversight, security management, and strategic decision-making into her role. Every action reinforced the understanding that she was more than a secretary. She was a pivotal figure whose judgment and decisiveness directly influenced outcomes. By late afternoon, Thomas took a moment to reflect. Olivia's actions had revealed a layer of capability and courage that he had never fully appreciated. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, demonstrating leadership, foresight, and unwavering clarity. Her influence extended beyond administrative duties. It shaped the entire office's stability and preparedness. Thomas spoke softly, almost as if testing the words aloud. Olivia, what you've done has changed everything, not just in this office, but in the way I view trust, judgment, and capability. I've underestimated you, and I realize now just how much I rely on your courage and insight. Olivia's gaze met his, calm yet resolute. It's always been about responsibility, she repeated, reinforcing the principle that had guided her actions. Every decision, every intervention had been driven by a clear understanding of stakes and consequences. The office grew quieter as the day waned. Thomas watched Olivia handle her tasks with seamless precision, reinforcing his recognition of her competence, courage, and insight. Her actions had not only stabilized operations, but had also shifted his perception of her role both professionally and personally. As evening approached, Thomas allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Olivia's courage and judgment had left a profound impression, altering how he understood reliance, capability, and strategic foresight. She had demonstrated that true bravery manifests in decisiveness, foresight, and clarity under pressure. By the time city lights began to flicker on outside the windows, Thomas and Olivia were immersed in their work, side by side, silently acknowledging the bond formed through shared experiences and challenges. He knew, with quiet certainty, that Olivia's presence was transformative, reshaping his understanding of trust, competence, and strategic foresight, and that nothing in the office dynamic would ever be quite the same again. The night had settled fully over the city, the lights below flickering like constellations scattered across the urban expanse. In the office, Thomas Westbrook remained at his desk, surrounded by spreadsheets, projections, and briefing reports. Despite the apparent calm, his mind lingered on the events that had occurred over the past several days. The intrusion, Olivia's decisive intervention, and the aftermath. Olivia moved quietly across the office floor, checking security monitors, reviewing internal communications, and ensuring every operational detail was accounted for. Thomas couldn't help but observe her closely. Every step she took, every action she executed, was deliberate, precise, and confident. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just a calm, methodical assurance that emanated from her very presence. "You've double-checked all protocols for tonight?" Thomas asked, his voice calm but layered with curiosity and respect. "Yes," Olivia replied. "All access points, communications, and security personnel have been reviewed. Contingency plans are in place for any unexpected scenarios. Nothing has been overlooked." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the depth of her capabilities. Yesterday had revealed a new layer of her character: courage under pressure, strategic thinking, and the ability to act decisively without hesitation. Her calmness in the face of danger was remarkable. But what struck him most was her foresight and judgment. He remembered the intruders vividly, their confidence, their cold determination, and how easily they could have disrupted the office. Yet Olivia had assessed every move, anticipated every possible outcome, and acted decisively to protect him and the company. Her courage was not loud or performative. It was calculated, purposeful, and profoundly effective. "You've transformed how I view operational stability and trust," Thomas said quietly. "Your foresight and courage yesterday, it's not just admirable, it's transformative. I underestimated how critical your role is, and I realize now that I couldn't manage without your judgment and decisiveness." Olivia met his gaze calmly. "It's not about recognition," she said. "It's about responsibility. Every decision has consequences, and it's essential to act with clarity and purpose." Thomas nodded, appreciating the wisdom in her words. Her bravery and competence were intrinsic, not performative. She had acted decisively because she understood the stakes, the potential consequences, and the importance of maintaining order. Her influence extended beyond administrative efficiency. It shaped outcomes and ensured the company remained secure, even under extraordinary circumstances. The office was quiet, yet charged with a subtle energy, a mutual acknowledgement of capability, trust, and the altered dynamic between them. Thomas observed Olivia as she moved between tasks, reviewing reports, monitoring communications, and coordinating with security teams. Every movement reinforced the understanding that she was more than a secretary. She was an indispensable force, a guardian of stability, and a decisive partner in moments of crisis. By late evening, Thomas took a moment to reflect. Olivia's actions over the past days had demonstrated qualities that went far beyond professional duty: strategic insight, moral courage, decisiveness, and an ability to anticipate challenges before they arose. Her competence had stabilized the office and maintained order when everything was at risk. "You've changed the way I view trust, judgment, and capability," Thomas said softly, almost to himself. "Your courage and foresight are not just valuable, they're essential. I've underestimated you, and I see now that your presence transforms every operation, every decision, every outcome." Olivia's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "It's always been about responsibility," she said. "Doing what's necessary, ensuring outcomes are secure, and protecting people, those are the priorities." Thomas considered her words. True bravery, he realized, wasn't about heroic gestures or dramatic displays. It was about clarity, foresight, and the willingness to act decisively when stakes were highest. Olivia had exemplified that in every decision, every move, and every intervention over the past days. As the night deepened, Thomas and Olivia continued their work side by side. Their interactions were minimal, yet each glance, each acknowledgement, carried the weight of shared understanding. The events of the past days had forged a subtle bond, a recognition of competence, trust, and courage that needed no words. Thomas knew that Olivia's influence extended far beyond her title. She had redefined his perception of what it meant to be capable, courageous, and indispensable. Her judgment, foresight, and bravery would shape the company's trajectory and their professional dynamic for years to come. By the time the city lights glimmered across the skyline, Thomas allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. Olivia had demonstrated that true capability involved anticipation, decisiveness, and moral clarity. She had transformed not only the office's operations, but also his understanding of leadership, trust, and reliance. And in that quiet acknowledgement, he realized something profound. Olivia wasn't just a secretary or assistant. She was a force, a partner, and a guardian whose presence, judgment, and courage had reshaped his world forever. The office had settled into a rare quietness as night deepened, the hum of the city below muted by distance and height. Thomas Westbrook remained at his desk, his attention divided between the reports in front of him and the events that had unfolded over the past several days. Olivia's decisive intervention during the intrusion and her meticulous management afterward continued to resonate in his mind. He couldn't help but reflect on the depth of her abilities and the subtle yet profound shift in their dynamic. Olivia moved with her usual grace and efficiency, checking the security feeds, updating logs, and reviewing communications. Even after the events of the past days, she was alert, precise, and calm. Every movement carried purpose, every decision reflected foresight. Thomas found himself observing her with a mixture of admiration and intrigue. He had relied on her competence countless times before, but yesterday had revealed a dimension of her character he had never fully appreciated. "You've reviewed all contingencies for tonight?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying underlying curiosity and respect. "Yes," Olivia replied. "All systems are secure, and the teams have been briefed. Every communication channel is monitored, and all potential risks have been accounted for. Nothing will catch us off guard." Thomas leaned back, exhaling slowly. He marveled at how seamlessly she integrated strategic foresight, operational control, and crisis management. Olivia's bravery and precision weren't performative. They were intrinsic, a reflection of her judgment, responsibility, and clarity of thought. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, and the consequences of her decisions had been transformative for both him and the company. He recalled the intrusion vividly. 4 intruders, confident and aggressive, facing a room full of people who might have panicked. Olivia had stepped forward with calm authority, anticipating their every move, protecting Thomas, and neutralizing the threat with precision. Her actions had not only saved him, but had ensured the stability of the office and reinforced a standard of excellence. "You've changed the way I view operational readiness and trust," Thomas said, his voice quiet but sincere. "Your foresight and courage, it's not just impressive, it's transformative. I've underestimated how crucial your judgment is." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "It's not about recognition," she said. "It's about responsibility. Every action has consequences, and I make sure those consequences are manageable." Thomas nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Her courage, foresight, and decisiveness were inseparable from her professional capability. She had not only prevented potential chaos, but had redefined the parameters of trust, reliance, and competence in his mind. The office remained quiet, yet charged with an undercurrent of acknowledgement. Thomas observed Olivia as she moved through tasks, reviewed reports, and coordinated communications. Each action reinforced the understanding that she was more than a secretary. She was a critical partner, a stabilizing force, and a decisive presence capable of navigating uncertainty with precision. By late evening, Thomas allowed himself a rare reflection. Olivia had demonstrated qualities that went beyond professional duty: strategic insight, moral courage, decisiveness, and clarity under pressure. Her influence extended far beyond administrative efficiency. It shaped the entire office's stability and ensured that every operation ran smoothly, even in the face of unexpected challenges. "You've changed the way I view trust, judgment, and capability," Thomas said softly, almost to himself. "Your courage and foresight are indispensable. I've underestimated you, and I understand now how much the company and I rely on your judgment and decisive action." Olivia's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "It's always been about responsibility," she said. "Doing what's necessary to maintain order, stability, and safety has always been the priority." Thomas considered her words carefully. True bravery, he realized, wasn't about flamboyant gestures or dramatic displays. It was about clarity, foresight, and the willingness to act decisively when stakes were high. Olivia had exemplified this repeatedly over the past days. As night deepened further, Thomas and Olivia continued their work side by side. Their interactions were quiet but meaningful, each glance and movement carrying unspoken acknowledgement, a recognition of competence, trust, and courage forged through shared experiences and challenges. Thomas understood, with quiet certainty, that Olivia's presence had transformed not only the office's operations, but also the way he perceived capability, judgment, and loyalty. She had redefined the professional and personal dynamics between them, leaving a lasting impression that would influence both the company's trajectory and their own relationship. By the time the city outside had fully settled into the stillness of night, Thomas allowed himself to recognize a profound truth. Olivia was not merely an assistant or secretary. She was decisive, courageous, and insightful, a force whose judgment, foresight, and unwavering commitment had reshaped his understanding of leadership, trust, and reliance. And in that quiet, shared acknowledgement, Thomas knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Not the office, not their dynamic, and not the way he viewed Olivia herself. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, with sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Westbrook Industries office. Thomas sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly projections and operational reports, but his attention kept drifting to the events of the past several days. The intrusion, Olivia's decisive intervention, and the calm authority she had displayed continued to resonate in his mind. He realized that what had unfolded was more than just a test of competence, it had been a revelation. Olivia moved efficiently through the office, reviewing security feeds, cross-checking communications, and confirming that every operational detail had been accounted for. Even after the heightened tension of the past days, her demeanor was composed, controlled, and unwavering. Every step she took conveyed precision and purpose, a reflection of her strategic insight and unshakable judgment. "You've reviewed all contingencies for today?" Thomas asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge of curiosity and respect. "Yes," Olivia replied. "All protocols are updated, teams are briefed, and all communication channels are monitored. We're prepared for any potential scenario. Nothing will catch us off guard." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on her capabilities. Olivia's bravery wasn't performative, it was calculated, precise, and grounded in responsibility. Her decisiveness yesterday had revealed a level of strategic foresight and moral courage that went far beyond her role as his secretary. She had acted to protect him, the company, and the people within it, demonstrating qualities that few could match. He recalled the intruders vividly: confident, aggressive, and unrelenting. Most people would have panicked or frozen, but Olivia had moved with purpose. She had assessed threats, predicted outcomes, and acted decisively to neutralize the danger. Her calm authority had not only safeguarded Thomas, but had maintained the integrity of the office's operations. "You've redefined my understanding of trust and operational competence," Thomas said quietly. "Your foresight, judgment, and courage are remarkable. I've underestimated your influence and the depth of your capability." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "It's not about recognition," she said. "It's about responsibility. Decisions have consequences, and it's essential to act with clarity and precision." Thomas nodded, fully appreciating her perspective. Her courage and competence were inseparable from her sense of responsibility. She had demonstrated that true capability was measured not by recognition or accolades, but by clarity of thought, decisiveness, and the ability to act effectively under pressure. The office maintained a quiet, focused rhythm. Thomas watched as Olivia moved seamlessly between tasks, reviewing operational reports, monitoring communications, coordinating with security teams, and anticipating potential risks. Every action reinforced his growing awareness that she was far more than a secretary. She was a stabilizing force, a decisive presence, and a strategic partner whose influence directly affected outcomes. By late morning, Thomas convened a brief meeting with senior managers to review progress and confirm that operational protocols were secure. Olivia monitored communications and provided updates only when necessary, offering critical insights that ensured efficiency and cohesion. Her subtle guidance shaped the meeting's flow, maintaining control without drawing attention to herself. After the meeting, Thomas returned to his office, reflecting on the subtle but profound shift in their professional dynamic. Olivia's actions had demonstrated qualities that transcended administrative duties: foresight, moral courage, decisiveness, and clarity of judgment. She had stabilized the office, safeguarded operations, and ensured that every action was executed flawlessly. "You've changed the way I view leadership and trust," Thomas said softly. "Your courage, judgment, and foresight are indispensable. I realize now how much the company and I depend on your decisiveness." Olivia's eyes met his with calm intensity. "Responsibility has always been the priority," she said, "ensuring stability, anticipating risk, and acting decisively when necessary. That's what matters." Thomas considered her words carefully. True bravery, he realized, wasn't about dramatic gestures or recognition. It was about clarity of thought, strategic foresight, and unwavering commitment to action when stakes were high. Olivia had exemplified this consistently over the past days, and it had reshaped his perception of her role and the dynamics of trust between them. The office fell into a focused quiet as afternoon progressed. Thomas continued reviewing reports, while Olivia executed tasks with seamless precision. Every glance, every action, and every decision reinforced the recognition that she was far more than her title suggested. She was indispensable, a force capable of maintaining order, guiding outcomes, and shaping the office's trajectory. By evening, Thomas reflected on the profound impact Olivia had made. Her courage, judgment, and decisiveness had altered his understanding of trust, capability, and responsibility. She had proven that true strength manifests not in volume or ostentation, but in clarity, insight, and the ability to act decisively when it matters most. As night fell, Thomas and Olivia continued their work, side by side, silently acknowledging the bond forged through shared experiences and challenges. He realized that from this moment forward, Olivia's presence would not just be valued, it would be central to his understanding of leadership, trust, and the operational stability of the company. By the time the city lights glimmered outside the windows, Thomas understood a quiet, undeniable truth. Olivia was more than a secretary or assistant. She was a strategic partner, a decisive force, and a guardian whose foresight and courage had forever changed his perspective and the dynamics of the office. The night deepened over the city, turning the skyline into a shimmering tapestry of lights and shadows. Inside Westbrook Industries, Thomas Westbrook sat at his desk, reviewing strategic projections and operational briefs, yet his mind kept returning to the events of the past several days. The intrusion, Olivia's decisive intervention, and the calm authority she had displayed continued to resonate in his thoughts. Olivia moved quietly across the office, checking security monitors, confirming communications, and verifying operational updates. Despite the heightened tension of the past days, she maintained her composure, her movements precise and deliberate. Thomas watched her carefully. Every gesture, every decision she executed was purposeful, reflecting strategic insight, courage, and clarity of thought. "You've reviewed all contingencies for the evening?" Thomas asked, his voice calm yet layered with respect. "Yes," Olivia replied. "All systems are secure, teams are briefed, communication channels are monitored, contingencies for all potential scenarios are in place. We're ready for any situation." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the breadth of her capabilities. Her courage wasn't about dramatics, it was about calculated decisiveness and foresight. She had acted with precision under pressure, safeguarding him, the company, and everyone within it. Her calm authority had prevented chaos and demonstrated a level of competence that few could match. He thought back to the intruders, confident, aggressive, and poised to disrupt. Most people would have faltered, but Olivia had assessed the threat, anticipated outcomes, and acted decisively. Her actions had preserved not just his safety, but the stability of the office. It was an extraordinary display of clarity under pressure, judgment, and moral courage. "You've changed the way I view trust, operational competence, and leadership," Thomas said quietly. "Your foresight and courage are transformative. I've underestimated the depth of your capabilities and the impact of your decisions." "Yes." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "It's not about recognition," she replied. "It's about responsibility. Every action has consequences, and it's essential to act with clarity, precision, and accountability." Thomas nodded, fully appreciating the truth in her words. Her bravery, judgment, and decisiveness were intrinsic to her character. She had not only prevented potential disruption, but had also redefined his understanding of trust, reliance, and strategic capability. The office remained quiet but charged with subtle acknowledgement. Thomas observed Olivia as she coordinated with teams, verified reports, and monitored communications. Every action reinforced his growing awareness that she was far more than a secretary. She was a stabilizing force, a decisive presence, and a strategic partner whose influence shaped outcomes and ensured operational continuity. By late evening, Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection. Olivia's actions had demonstrated qualities that went beyond professional duty: foresight, moral courage, decisiveness, and clarity under pressure. Her influence extended beyond administrative tasks. It ensured stability, mitigated risk, and maintained order in the face of potential chaos. "You've changed the way I view leadership, judgment, and trust," Thomas said softly. "Your courage and foresight are indispensable. I understand now how much the company and I depend on your decisive judgment." Olivia's gaze met his, calm and unwavering. "Responsibility has always been the priority," she replied. "Maintaining order, anticipating risk, and acting decisively when necessary, that's what matters most." Thomas considered her words. True courage, he realized, was not about grand gestures. It was about clarity, foresight, and the willingness to act decisively when stakes were high. Olivia had exemplified these qualities repeatedly, and in doing so, had reshaped his perception of her role and the dynamics of trust between them. The office fell into a focused quiet as night deepened. Thomas continued reviewing reports while Olivia executed tasks with precision, her efficiency and decisiveness reinforcing the understanding of her indispensability. Each glance and action carried unspoken acknowledgement, a recognition of competence, trust, and courage forged through shared experiences and challenges. By the time the city outside was cloaked in darkness, Thomas recognized a profound truth. Olivia was more than an assistant or secretary. She was a strategic partner, a stabilizing force, and a decisive presence whose foresight, judgment, and courage had forever altered the dynamics of the office and his perception of what it meant to rely on someone completely. For the first time, he allowed himself to acknowledge quietly that the events of the past days had changed not only the company's operations, but also his understanding of trust, reliance, and capability. Olivia had proven that true strength manifests in clarity, decisiveness, and unwavering judgment under pressure. The night had deepened into a hushed calm, the city below bathed in the warm glow of countless lights. Inside Westbrook Industries, Thomas Westbrook remained at his desk, though his mind was no longer solely on reports or projections. The events of the past days, the intrusion, Olivia's decisive actions, and her unwavering composure kept replaying in his thoughts. Every detail of her courage, judgment, and strategic foresight seemed to echo louder with each passing moment. Olivia moved quietly through the office, checking monitors, updating logs, and ensuring that every operational protocol was accounted for. Thomas watched her, recognizing for perhaps the first time the full extent of her capabilities. Her efficiency, her calm authority, and her unwavering judgment under pressure had not only safeguarded him, but had ensured the stability and continuity of the company. She was more than a secretary. She was the quiet force that maintained order and balance in moments when chaos threatened. "You've reviewed everything for tonight?" Thomas asked, his tone calm but edged with respect and curiosity. "Yes," Olivia replied. "All security points have been confirmed, communication channels are monitored, and all contingency plans are in place. There are no gaps in our preparations." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reflecting on her words and actions. Courage and competence, he realized, were not always loud or performative. Olivia had demonstrated that true bravery existed in clarity of thought, foresight, and decisive action. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, protecting him, the company, and the people who relied on their judgment. He recalled the moment she had stood between him and the intruders, the calm precision in her movements, the unwavering confidence in her voice, and the ability to anticipate every threat before it could materialize. Most people would have panicked, hesitated, or faltered. Olivia had done none of those things. She had acted with clarity, responsibility, and courage. "You've changed the way I perceive trust, judgment, and operational competence," Thomas said quietly. "Your foresight and decisiveness are not just remarkable, they're transformative. I've underestimated the impact of your presence and judgment, and I see now how much we depend on your courage and insight." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Responsibility has always been the priority," she said. "Ensuring stability, anticipating risks, and acting decisively when necessary, that's what matters most." Thomas nodded, fully comprehending the weight of her words. Her courage, foresight, and decisiveness were inseparable from her sense of responsibility. She had not only preserved order but had redefined what it meant to be reliable, capable, and courageous in his eyes. The office was quiet, yet charged with a subtle understanding. Thomas observed Olivia as she continued her meticulous work, reviewing reports, coordinating communications, and verifying protocols. Every action reinforced the awareness that she was indispensable, a stabilizing force whose presence ensured that the company could navigate even the most unpredictable circumstances. By late evening, Thomas allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Olivia's actions had revealed qualities beyond professional duty: strategic foresight, moral courage, clarity under pressure, and unwavering decisiveness. She had not only stabilized the office, but had reshaped his understanding of trust, reliance, and leadership. "You've transformed the way I see everything," Thomas said softly. "Not just the office, not just the company, but you. Your courage, judgment, and foresight are invaluable, and I understand now just how much I rely on you." Olivia's eyes met his with calm intensity. "It's always been about responsibility," she said. "Every decision matters, every action has consequences, and it's essential to act with clarity and purpose." As marks. Thomas reflected on her words, realizing that true bravery and capability were demonstrated through clarity, foresight, and decisive action. Olivia had exemplified this consistently, transforming not only the operations of the company, but also his understanding of leadership, trust, and reliance. As the night deepened, Thomas and Olivia worked side by side in quiet synchrony. Their interactions were subtle yet meaningful, carrying an unspoken acknowledgement of competence, courage, and trust forged through shared experience. The events of the past days had created a bond grounded in reliability, judgment, and mutual respect, a recognition that required no words but was deeply understood. By the time the city outside had quieted, Thomas understood something profound. Olivia was not merely a secretary or assistant, she was a decisive force, a strategic partner, and a guardian of stability. Her judgment, foresight, and courage had forever changed the dynamics of the office and his perception of what it meant to trust, rely on, and value someone completely. For the first time, Thomas allowed himself to quietly acknowledge the truth. Olivia's presence was transformative. Her courage, decisiveness, and insight had shaped not only the company's future, but also his understanding of capability, loyalty, and trust. And from that moment forward, nothing, neither the office